Hello everybody, and welcome to our meeting about document design and revision, which is going to cover your major assignment number 2 that is due at the end of week 4 on September the 18th. So let's get started. When you open up the document that you'll be looking at revising, you'll see that it's packed with content about juvenile diabetes. So your goal is to take this very messy, very repetitive, very inaccessible Word document and transform it into a brochure. So the first step in doing that is obviously going to be selecting the appropriate content from the original Word document that you're going to want to pull into the brochure that you create. So if you remember in our very first recorded meeting, I talked about the rhetorical situation. And one of the most important factors of the rhetorical situation is your audience and thinking about who they are and what they need and how you're going to use rhetorical appeals to accomplish your goal. So obviously you're also thinking about what is your purpose and goal. I'll tell you what it should be. Since we're all working on the same project, we all have the same goal, and that is to convey information about juvenile diabetes in a way that is easy to understand and appropriate for the target audience, which is parents of children who've just been diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. A secondary audience could be other family members or even the child themselves if they are, maybe an adolescent, they're 11 to 14 years old. They might also be taking a look at this. But our primary consideration is the parents of children who've just received this diagnosis. So in thinking through their needs and rhetorical appeals, these things sort of go together. You might have already learned a little bit about rhetorical appeals in a different English class, so just a quick crash course on those. The main rhetorical appeals are ethos, pathos, and logos. And ethos is appealing to the audience's need for credibility. So that means that you want to present information in a way that's confident and reassures the reader that what you're saying is credible and accurate. When it comes to pathos, that's an appeal to readers' emotion. So you want to think about A, what kind of emotion the audience is already experiencing, and then B, what kind of emotion you're trying to get them to experience. So it probably goes without saying that a parent who is just learning that their child has juvenile diabetes is feeling, scared, uncertain about the future, maybe confused, some negative emotions. And your goal in terms of the emotion you're trying to elicit is reassurance and comfort and perhaps even compassion. So you want to think about how you're presenting this material in order to get the audience to feel better about what's going on. And informed as well. That's definitely a primary goal here, is that if someone were to read this brochure from front to back, they're going to feel very informed about juvenile diabetes. And then the third rhetorical appeal is logos, which is appealing to the reader's sense of logic. And that's really important because you want everything to make sense. It's connected with the appeal to credibility. If everything is presented in a logical, methodical type of way, that builds credibility, and it also makes the information easier to understand. Okay, moving on. When I work with a document like this that I need to convert into a different format, something that is more readable and more accessible, and I do this pretty frequently as a freelancer. I work with companies who just give me an information dump and they say, pull out the stuff that we need and make it look nice, make it look like something someone wants to pick up and actually go through. So I have a technique when I approach a project like this that I'll share with you guys because I think it will help you dive into the assignment. I suggest taking the Word document with all the content and extracting all of the information that you want to include in the brochure. So that's your sort of step one. And you could do this either by deleting repetition from the document, so kind of cutting out what you know you're not going to use or what you don't want to use, or even highlighting it red if you shy away from deleting things. Or you could even have two categories of keep and don't keep, or use and don't use, and start separating all that information. Alternatively, you can copy paste the things that you know you want to use into a new document. So that's actually extracting. So you're just extracting from the original, putting it into another document so that you can have a better picture of what you're going to include in the brochure, and then you can work on organizing it from there after you've kind of gotten rid of and eliminated all the stuff that you don't want. And once you have done that, so you've got all the content that you want to use separated, highlighted, or in a new document, then you want to work on revising that content for clarity and concision, because as you're going to see, the writing in the original is atrocious and it's not at all clear or concise. So a couple of tips for doing that. Number one, you want to use simple words. It's not a brochure for medical professionals, it's a brochure for parents of children. So you want to make sure that you're not using jargon or words that are difficult to understand, or that someone would have to go Google to look up to see what they mean. At the same time, we don't want to be too simple. I'll share with you a mistake a lot of students make on this is instead of using the word urine, they use the word pee. Now, that's not appropriate because this is a professional document coming out of a doctor's office. So you want to find that fine line in between being professional, clear, and concise, while not being too hard to understand, but also not going down to, kindergarten level either. Number two, you want to look for unnecessary words and groups of words. This is a big tip that applies to any time that you're revising for conciseness. Groups of little words like to be able to, right? Think about that phrase, to be able to. You can almost always revise that out of writing. Those words they make things very, very wordy and dense, and they don't contribute any value to a sentence. You just look for a way to rewrite the sentence. So for example, she was able to build the building. Instead of saying that, we can say she could build the building, right? So we take was able to and turn it into could, and that makes things a lot more concise and shorter and less dense. Don't repeat information. There's a lot of repetition in the original document, and you want to eliminate that. This is a 6-panel short brochure. There's no need to repeat information unless perhaps you identify something that you think is extremely important and worth repeating for the purposes of emphasizing the information. And lastly, number 4, be direct. You want this information to come across in a way that is just very straightforward. You're not going to be using a lot of adjectives or including any subjective opinion type of content. So when we think about revising, your goals are to have an objective brochure that is based on fact, something that is skimmable. And I had commented on this in an announcement. Skimmable is a good thing. You want for your reader to be able to skim the document, whatever type of document it is, easily get a sense of what the whole thing is about, and identify sections of the document that are most relevant to them so they can jump right to what they want. That's something a lot of us do. We take a look at something, we're able to find the content we want, perhaps in the middle of a web page. We get what we want, and then maybe we go back to the beginning and read from start to finish, or we don't because we didn't need to. So we want to make it easiest for the readers to get what they want, and we do that by making sure the document is skimmable. And another goal to keep in mind is that you want the content to be digestible or accessible. They mean the same thing, and all that means is that it's easy to comprehend. It's easy to consume the writing, take it in, understand what it means. So thinking, I guess, more globally about the goals, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, you are developing a brochure for a healthcare clinic. So it has to be a 6-panel brochure. You're not doing a flyer. You can't just do a Word document with headings. It needs to be a 6-panel brochure. You're going to select important content from the original document, revise it for clarity and concision, and then organize it appropriately within the brochure. I do want you to use highlighting techniques, and I have a slide outlining what those are in just a minute. You will be using visuals, so building on what you learned during our last assignment, you're going to be able to take the visuals and incorporate them into the brochure because it's in Word, so you know how to do that now in a way that is visually appealing and looks neat. And I want to share an example as well of how you can condense writing and make it more concise. I like to share examples like this throughout the semester just so you can start seeing the techniques for trimming things down and getting concise writing. So in the original text, it says, shingles is an infection of a nerve and the area of the skin supplied by the nerve. It is caused by the virus called the varicella zoster virus. It is the same virus that causes chickenpox. Anyone who has had chickenpox in the past may develop shingles. Shingles is sometimes called herpes zoster. So that's 51 words, right? That's kind of a mouthful. It's got a lot of information. It's certainly informational and educational, but there's a way to convey all of this in much less space. So in the revised text, it says shingles, also called herpes zoster, is an infection of a nerve in the skin around it. Anyone who has had chickenpox in the past may develop shingles since they are caused by the same virus. So if you take a look at the color coding in the original example, you can see that the yellow information, that's important. These are the objective facts, and it's definitely what you want to convey right off the bat. So I took those yellow areas and combined them into the first sentence. We didn't need to have that last shingles is sometimes called herpes zoster. That didn't need to be just tacked on to the end as a random thing. It needed to be in the beginning, and we didn't need as many words to say it. The content that's highlighted in red just isn't that important. It's not that relevant to give that information, so it got removed. And then the content that is highlighted in purple is important, but it was just way too dense, so it got converted into fewer words. So you can see 51 words versus 36 words. So in terms of thinking how to organize appropriately and have a nice looking visual product at the end, you want to think about the genre and the format. So we talked about the genre, which if you're not sure what genres are, you can think about it in terms of music to best understand it. So music has genres like country, pop, rap, gospel, heavy metal, right? So those are all types of music. So genres are types of something, and we have many genres in writing, from newspapers, journal articles, websites, textbooks, emails. These are all types of writing. So our genre here is decided for us, and it's a brochure, and it's a professional medical brochure. That's the genre, and the format is also decided for us. It's going to be a 6-panel brochure, or also known as a trifold brochure. So when we think about how to organize and design it, we want to think about CRAP, which is an acronym for some principles of design. So let's take a look at those. In CRAP, the CR stands for contrast and repetition. So what we're going to do in terms of contrast is distinguish different sections with contrast, meaning that you're going to use bolding, different text sizes to contrast like a heading from the actual content, even line thickness, and you'll see some examples of that in an example that I'm going to show you. You also want to repeat aspects of design in terms of the title size or the heading size. You don't want to have one heading be 12 point and the next one be 16 point. Like, there needs to be consistency so that the document looks professionally designed. The same thing with the shape of visuals. You want to keep those consistent for the most part, as well as the color of any hyperlinks that you have. And you may or may not include hyperlinks in the document. This is actually more so meant to be presented as a physical brochure someone would pick up, but it is okay to also have the digital version of it. So if you find that you want to include a hyperlink or two, that's great. Just make sure that they're the same color. The AP in CRAP stands for alignment and proximity. So with alignment and proximity, that just means that for the alignment, you're going to keep the justification, like left justification or things that are centered. You're going to keep that, again, the same throughout the document, and you're going to use centering and justification to emphasize key points. With proximity, this means that you keep like elements of content near one another. So content that is related in its nature or in its ideas should be kept, on the same panel. You don't want to have something on the 3rd panel and then something that's relevant to it, you don't see it again until the 5th panel. So you want it to be organized in a way that flows, where content that is relevant to each other is presented, before or after, and everything is logically organized. So here are the highlighting techniques that I told you I would share with you. They're pretty simple. You guys already know all of these. You may just not use them all that often, at least not with intention. So here you should think about how you can use these techniques intentionally. And this is like something that I usually consider a polishing step. So it would be after you've extracted all of your content, you've revised it for concision, you've got your brochure laid out pretty well. Then you start looking like, okay, how can I highlight things? How can I bold? How can I italicize? Where should I underline? Should I underline at all? You don't have to use all the highlighting techniques. You just use some of them. Overdoing it tends to just make things look too busy. You can use all caps for your headings or for important words within the text. There's lots of different ways to call attention. One thing that's not on here is the use of bullet points, but you guys already know that that's a good way to break something out of a paragraph and call attention to it. So there's not a perfect way to do this. There's a variety of good ways to highlight information within this brochure, and you just want to apply your own style, your own creativity to make it the best that you can make it. I already mentioned that your brochure is going to have visuals, so please don't turn in a text-only brochure. You'll lose points for that. And also, just as a side note, don't leave any panels blank. Some people manage to really trim down the content and like cram it all into 3 or 4 panels and then just have 2 blank ones. That's not acceptable. That you would never see a brochure in the real world that just had completely blank panels. You need to figure out strategically how to have content on every single panel. One tip that I'll give you is that the back panel is frequently used to present just like contact information for the facility where the brochure is at, and that's fine. So it might not be a whole lot of content. You might just have, say, a picture of the building, and you can just Google image that, like picture of the facility, a doctor's office or whatever, and feel free to contact us at any time. Here's our phone number and email. Maybe you have the address below the image of the building, and then the website at the bottom. So you can have one panel that's not necessarily talking about juvenile diabetes directly, but only the one panel. And if you do that, it really should be the contact information. Even if you don't have a whole panel dedicated to contact information, somewhere in the brochure absolutely needs to include contact information, because that is just standard practice for a brochure. Make sure that your visuals are related to the content. You're not just going to throw in a random visual of a teddy bear because this is talking about juveniles. You can throw in a picture of a child receiving a shot or a blood glucose test or something because that's relevant. But you don't just want to have a picture of kids at a park, right? That's not really relevant. So think hard about the visuals that you decide to use. Of course, it's great to use visuals that represent data and statistics, so you can include stuff like that as well. Like on the front of the brochure, however, it would be better probably to have just an image, just a picture of a parent and a child or something, again, relevant to the content. And then maybe somewhere else you might have the visual that's more statistically or data driven. Make sure outside of the image, maybe on the front panel, and you can have other images too, it doesn't have to be only on the front panel. There's really not limitations. All of our work in this class is really open to your interpretation. As long as the end product is good, you can really play around with it. But things that aren't just images, make sure that it's aiding the understanding of the content, meaning you don't just throw in data that you don't talk about in the content. You have to reference the information in a graph or a figure within the content so that it's all connected and just building understanding. And that really is kind of just going along with the last point here, supplementing the overall content and design. So last thing is I just want to make sure everybody knows how to actually make a brochure in Microsoft Word. So I'm going to scoot on out of the PowerPoint here and show you what I suggest doing in order to get your document going. So we're going to hop into our course, and if you take a look in the content, you will see in week 3, document design, in the learning materials, the very last item is a sample brochure. So I suggest that you open up the sample brochure It's going to open up within Brightspace, but then you're going to go ahead and download it. Once you download it, what you have is absolutely amazing because it's already the 6-panel or trifold brochure formatting. You don't have to really mess around with that at all. And even better, all the content in this sample brochure is information for you that you absolutely should read that will help you create the brochure. So it's just giving you more education on the appropriate strategies for creating this assignment. You can go ahead and then use this document, just do a file, save as, and save it with your name and the assignment name, and you can start creating your brochure right here. So there's already a lot of great things happening in terms of bullet points and headings and subheadings, some color, images that are appropriately captioned. So you've got essentially a lot of the work is done for you. Of course, you have to do the work of getting that content in, and not all of this setup is going to work for the juvenile diabetes brochure, but a lot of it will. So you can use this if you would like. Alternatively, if you are super creative or you hate this and you just want to do it from scratch, you can do that too. You would do that just by going to File, New. Oops, okay, that was not what I wanted. File and then New, and then you're going to search right here for brochures. And you can choose any one of these templates to work with and create your own brochure. The only issue with this that I think makes it a little bit difficult sometimes to work with, for example, let's say we selected the Blue Spheres brochure. You have a lot of formatting that's difficult to get rid of. So, for example, we don't necessarily need these huge circles, right? They're not necessarily going to work really well for the juvenile diabetes brochure, and you can't get rid of them. You can type in them, but you can't just click them and delete them. And on the second page, you can see there's this just huge image that's not relevant. You don't want it. There's not a nice delineation between the panels here, which doesn't work well for our purposes. So you can choose a different brochure template. I suggest if you do that you, before you commit to one and start working on it, that you look at all the panels and make sure that there's nothing that's fixed that you can't get rid of that you're not going to be able to work with. So that being said, let's jump right back into our PowerPoint. And very last slide is just reminding you of the due dates. So the final brochure is due Sunday, the 18th, before midnight. This is our first little bit longer unit. It's 2 weeks long. So I have our little meme, right? If tomorrow isn't the due day, then today isn't the due day. And I know we all procrastinate. I mean, I do too. I think people who don't are rare gems. But I bring it up just to encourage you not to procrastinate. This can be a little bit longer of an assignment than you think because there's a lot of steps involved, from that initial document into having a really polished looking final product that you've proofread and is well designed. So I don't suggest starting it the day it's due or the day before that it's due. I would break it up into some chunks, work on getting your content out of the big document, extracting, and then maybe, in round 2, you're working on getting it into the brochure, and in round 3, you're polishing and highlighting and doing all of those things. As far as the discussion board goes, the same guidelines apply. So this week, in the first week of the unit, there's actually only 2 discussion questions. So you're going to be responding to both of them and then commenting on your peers' responses. So just keep up the good work. I've been really impressed with the thoroughness of a lot of the answers and the reflection and how you guys are really thinking through things. And I'm liking what I see, so please keep up the good work with that. And then next week, there will be 2 additional or possibly 3 different questions that you can respond to. So that wraps everything up for this major assignment. If you guys have questions, you can ask them definitely on the discussion board, or you can ask them, via email, whichever you're more comfortable with. And I hope you guys have a great week ahead. Take care.